it might be helpful to kind of go back and set the kind of context a little bit and talk about how they came together. Let me first just state a few facts about the album just to sort of be on record there. But this was their debut album. Vivid was released May 2nd, 1988 on Epic Records. Was produced by Ed Stasium, who worked with bands like Talking Heads, Ramones, Motorhead, among others. A smaller producing credit on this, however, went to none other than Mick Jagger, who, I mean, to say he played a major role in launching their career might be underselling it. He was kind of why they became popular. Not in a sense of, I'm not saying they couldn't hold their own. They're obviously sick musicians, but it's clear that totally opened the door for them. And again, back to this duality thing, in some ways better or worse, because they felt like sort of, oh, well, why do we need Mick Jagger? Like we can make it on our own merits. And, but meanwhile, you had a population, a part of the population anyway, that kind of thought of them as like, oh, you just know people, right? So they had Mick Jagger. Apparently, Kurt Loder was a big advocate, which is why they got so much run on MTV, which we'll talk about.
It's like a no-win situation. You know what I mean? Where it's like you made it big, okay, because you're a novelty. No, well, is it because you're great? Yes, but then Mick Jagger. But then you're always fighting that whole like, well, you were pushed here. God, that's rough, man.
Well, and frankly, if you go back and look into the backstory of any of these big bands, they all fucking know somebody.
Yeah.
Yeah, everybody knows somebody to give them a leg up. It's very, very rare that it was just entirely an organic thing and all the chips were stacked against you and you just happened to excel because maybe it's just you knew some club promoters in New York who happen to know some guys who wrote for the New York papers or something. But everybody knows somebody. Not everybody knows Mick Jagger, but everybody knows fucking somebody.
In the Gary Newman episode, one of the aspects of his stories is that he had Asperger's, so he was very regimented in certain things about his life, and so he basically engineered his own success. So like he was at home writing down like where and when the gig needed to be, which newspapers to invite, which record producers to invite to make sure these two ran into each other. So there's a lot of this that's not luck. There's a lot of it it was either Bob Hope or Johnny Carson that said his success was right place, right time, but he always made sure he was in the right place at the right time. So yeah, it's not, cuddling up to Mick Jagger, go for it, man. If that's what you need to do to get your foot in the door, I would have done the same.
I would cuddle up to fucking Kid Rock.
Right.
Kid Rock was like, hey man,
get me
listen,
on tour,
I can launch your career here. I'd be like, oh dude, did I ever tell you how much I love Cowboy? How great of a song that was?
I'm already clipping that sound clip to blackmail you with for the rest of your life.
Listen, man, if he comes up with a dump truck full of money, I'm not made of stone.
Yeah,
I am but a man.
Nobody in their right mind in the New York club scene where Mick Jagger was hanging out at the time is going to turn down his help. If he wants to help you, you are going to take it. But yeah, to your point, it did put them in a bit of an impossible situation. So kind of going back to that scene a little bit, it's clear these guys were very much a product of the times they came in. If you go back to like the early to mid 80s, it seems kind of hard to believe now. I know we're old, but it doesn't seem like that long ago. But MTV was starting to take off at that time and was obviously becoming like the dominant music medium of the day. But if you watched, like I did, way too much, you didn't see any Black people on MTV, and you certainly didn't see them playing rock music, and you certainly didn't see them like earlier than 10 o'clock at night. And in fact, there's a very famous David Bowie interview, I don't know if you guys have seen this before, where he kind of turns the tables on this MTV VJ who's interviewing him in I think it's like 83 or something. And he actually asks the MTV guy, like, why aren't there more Black artists on MTV? And it's really uncomfortable watching this guy start to sort of squirm a little bit, because he's sort of on the hook having to toe the company line, and he does this like spin thing, and but Bowie's really just sitting there scowling at him. And I'm certain after watching this video that they coined the term stink eye from watching the way that Bowie was sort of like sizing this guy up. So that was like the state of things
Yeah.
at the time.
I think it's also important context to that, and this actually came up on our Thriller episode, was that MTV was very hesitant to play what they considered not rock music. And rock was, as we're saying, like exclusively white at the time. Certainly popular rock music was exclusively white at the time. And so that sort of led to that. I don't necessarily think that there was a bunch of people sitting around a boardroom saying like, we can't have black people on MTV. I think that they were like, we're rock music. That's where the money is. And so we're going to play rock music. And so black rock band like Living Color comes around. MTV should be like, hey, this is exactly in our paradigm of what we want to play. And we want to get some diversity. It should be like a win-win. And again, it's not Living Color's fault that MTV would grasp onto that and be like, hey, we should play the shit out of their album.
Right.
Agreed. They were pretty desperate. I think they were feeling heat from all these different corners to, to find a band that could kind of break through that rock mold. And interestingly enough, as this was all sort of going on in like the early to mid 80s, kind of in the background, you had this virtuoso black guitar player named Vernon Reid, who was at that point pretty well known in the club circuit in New York. Both back again, this like duality. So he was known as like a jazz fusion player, but he also was kind of a punk rock guy and was doing a lot of weird experimental stuff. Like he totally unclassifiable, and but badass, right? And so Vernon Reid, he was born in the UK, hence the sort of British stylized color. COLOUR,
right.
Which I guess is a nod to the year and a half he lived there when he was a baby. I'm not sure, or just to fuck with everybody. But so he's sort of like cutting his teeth in this music scene, and sort of around 83, 84, he decides he wants to start doing his own thing instead of being sort of a side man or being part of these different groups. So he starts a group that I think at the time he was calling Vernon Reid's Living Color, which then he obviously shortened to Living Color. But it was this sort of like rotating ensemble of members who were, sort of jazz players, but it was very avant-garde and, nothing that would even approximate something that you might even hear on this album later on MTV. And so he becomes like pretty well known in New York, was building lots of community with other musicians, but of course, like he just wasn't able to break through that bubble and get signed. The record companies wouldn't touch them at that point, honestly, and it was sort of the classic line of too black for rock audiences, but too rock for black audiences, and maybe that was more so a few years later, but kind of
fusion for any audience.
Yeah, they're like, oh, my avant-garde jazz fusion band's not getting this record deal, right? It's because nobody listens to that shit. I'm sorry. like we got a friend who's he's James. He's been on the podcast a couple of times. Who just makes all synth albums, and I'm like, I'm glad you do that for your own personal edification, but there is no market for just like an all atonal arrhythmic synth. It's like, yeah. Sign me up, man. That's not going to be like dental torture for these 67 minutes that this album is.
Well, I'm intrigued now, actually.
Yeah, so now I'm going to ask him for a copy.
Speaking my language.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I think it was really hard to put anything that Vernon Reid was doing at any point into one specific genre, which actually leads to our favorite segment of the show, which is a segment called By the Numbers. And I'll start with the number 12, which is, according to the Wikipedia page for, I think it's for this album. Can't remember if it's for the band itself, but 12 is the number of genres that this album crosses according to Wikipedia. So musically,
which is too many.
Vivid has been I'm gonna name them. So let's just
okay. All right. Sorry.
Buckle in here for a second. So Vivid has been described as hard rock, heavy metal, funk metal, alternative metal, funk rock, with elements of soul, jazz, pop, rap, arena rock, punk, and avant-garde jazz. Let me just say that thank God new metal hadn't been coined as a term, because it definitely would have been thrown onto
Yeah, seriously.
this group.
Too much guitar work for new metal. They would have kicked them out of the new metal.
Yeah, there's guitar solos and stuff.
Solos? Get the hell out of here.
Not enough guttural screaming.
Yeah, I was gonna say, yeah, Corey Glover sounds too happy most of the time. Even when he's angry about stuff and like the open letter to a landlord, he still is kind of like, we're empowered. You can't keep us down, as opposed to
Positive.
You, Dad.
Right.
So backing down a little bit from the number 12, let's go with number 10, which is, and we've seen this a few times on the pod over the episodes here, but these sort of slow burns. 10 is the number of months that this album sat on record shelves, basically doing nothing, until MTV, again with sort of Kurt Loder like really leading the charge, started playing Cult of Personality extensively, which ultimately, propelled this into being in the Billboard Top 20 and spawning to the number 1, which is the next one I want to talk about, is the number of Grammys that this album won, which was Best Hard Rock Performance in 1990 for, of course, Cult of Personality.
I thought it was for Funny Vibe.
Right.
No.
Who knows? Another one, which was interesting to hang on to that number for a little bit, the number of covers on this record, which is actually a Talking Heads song called Memories Can't Wait, which is a really cool song. I do think they actually did a pretty nice job with that song, but why one? Why a Talking Heads? Unclear to me, but
they needed another genre. They needed to, I don't know if Talking Heads are their own genre, but
yeah. I liked that cover of the song. I will admit that it took me longer than it should have to realize that it was a Talking Heads cover. Partly just because I think I was getting beaten down by the album by the time I got 7 tracks in. I was just like, oh God, we're doing this
the 15th
again.
time through. It's a little bit of a workout there.
Well, I think the silver lining for them is that they probably don't give a shit what we think, because the final number is 2 million, which of course is the number of albums that have sold for Vivid. So of course, bringing it to double platinum status. Something I'm never clear on when I come across these is if that is like to date or if that was sort of a snapshot at some point. I don't think many records sell now anyway, so who knows? But so that number may be more, who knows? But hey, if you get double platinum, you definitely did something right. So props to these guys for that.
Definitely.
And speaking of props to all of you who continue to tune in to the show. We love doing this. It's the best part of the week for all of us. I'm sure. Maybe not Tom when he has to listen to albums like this, but we love having you all on the journey. And because of you, we're doing our best to find new ways to connect with you all each week. We're doing that through some various forums like newsletters and Patreon. We actually just spawned a new show, a bit of a spin-off show that is 90s rap battles, which is an excellent deep dive. If you want to see us fight with each other even more than we do now, I highly recommend checking that out. So
these are we just get in a group and just diss each other, right? Just dissing each other. You're of course referring to our best song of the 80s song battle, right?
Yeah, which one came? I don't even remember anymore.
So we already did the best song of the 90s. That's been out for a while. And then now we're doing March Radness, best song of the 80s.
Yes.
You said 90s rap battle, and I was like, holy shit, did I miss a taping? Because that sounds fucking awesome.
Well, it's just because it's all diss tracks against you, so we couldn't invite you to that. That tape.
Okay, dude, I have got hours and hours of diss tracks for all of you guys, cutting up old beats in my spare time.
And all the stupid shit we've said on this podcast.
Alan, I literally do have a diss track for you that I have recorded. I was going to use it in the fantasy football league and I wasn't able to use it, but yes.
I'm surprised you only have one, actually.
I'm talking fully produced. Like it's all the way produced. The whole song's done.
It's ready to go.
Yeah.
You just need to press it. You're good.
I'll send you the MP3 later.
I'm actually that might be some bonus content. So
I was
folks,
gonna
if you
say that's
follow,
that's some Patreon content right there.
Yeah.
hit up the Patreon. You never know what kind of nonsense will spring up. But again, thank you, like, subscribe, all that stuff. We love doing this and want to continue listening to these mediocre albums for your benefit. um, so I think we started talking about the Vernon Reid's journey in starting to assemble this group, and oh, sorry, I didn't know if one of you guys was talking.
Now, Adam
So
apparently has been, I don't know, just choking down gallons of mucus this entire episode. What's going on with you, Adam?
You can hear that? I thought
Every
I was
time you
hitting
go,
mute. Oh, Jesus.
you can
All
hear
right.
that? The sound of me hocking up a fucking head trail.
Well,
Like,
no,
yeah, we
because
can
I have a mute button on this thing that's supposed to work. So hopefully
Oh,
it's working
you
now.
overpowered the mute.
Wow,
well,
my phlegm is magical. All right, I'll try to hork off mic.
well, maybe that next Patreon subscription will help get
Some
Adam
Mucinex from me.
some new, or a proper mute button. You never know what you can do with the crowdsourcing. So Vernon Reid's doing his thing, and he's got this collective rotating members, and finally in around 86 he coalesces around 4 core members of the band, many of whom have already been mentioned. But you've got Vernon Reid on guitar. As vocalist, you've got this guy Corey Glover, who was alluded to, who played a small role in the movie Platoon, which, when Rob sent that photo out earlier in the week in the text thread with no context, it was clear that it was one of the guys, but he's dressed in.
You just have to find out who.
He looks like he's like 15. He's got these army fatigues on, and I was just like, I don't even know the context behind this photo. I don't know if they pulled him out of some revolutionary camp or something, but
I actually really like that character in Platoon. He's one of my favorite guys because he's the one who, like, when the shit starts going down, he's always like, yeah, let's just get the fuck out of here. Why are we sticking? Let's Dee man. Let's Dee. Let's get the fuck out of here. I'm like, I'm with you, man. Why are you sticking around? Get the fuck out of there. Nobody cares.
like, we can just leave. What?
Yeah.
That's an option.
No one's gonna recognize me in Vietnam. Okay. Rounded out by drummer Will Calhoun, who he graduated with honors from the Berklee College of Music. I find that most impressive, not because of the with honors part, but I've never heard of anyone actually graduating from Berklee. It seems like the kind of place you go and
you only go there for 1 or 2 years and then you leave, right?
I know several people who graduated from Berklee, and they all work at Guitar Center.
No.
I'm not joking about that. I actually know 3 people who graduated from Berklee, and they all work at Guitar Center.
Having gone through the corporate meat grinder, it's actually not sounding too bad. But
That
anyway,
sounds too bad.
I digress. And then finally, the name was already referenced earlier, but we didn't discuss his status as the newest entry into the 1001 Album Complaints Hilarious Name Hall of Fame, which is bassist Muzz Skillings. So amazing name.
Yes.
Also,
Muzz.
fun fact about him: by the time that he got pulled into this project in 86, he was really close to becoming a full-time firefighter.
Really?
Which is crazy because he is a great, I mean, great bassist. Again, it doesn't always fit what's happening in the song, but I mean, the chops for days.
Yeah.
So this was the group that they, coalesced around and, started to, really want to run with.
Quick question for you. I was not able to figure out, is Muzz Skillings his real name? I couldn't figure out if that was his real name or not.
That's a good question. According to his Wikipedia page, it's just Muzz. I'm not gonna.
He's got some down ass parents. What are you gonna name your baby? Muzz.
Muzz.
Yeah, it's not short for
Muzzard?
anything. It's just
Muzzling? I don't know what
Koozies.
that could be.
Yeah.
Not to be confused with Muff Winwood, who was discussed on a previous episode. Plus, with a name like that, I'm not going to ask you too many questions. I'm just going to assume you know what's up. But so we'll kind of give a little bit more into the context here, and then we can start talking about some of the songs. But ultimately, they start getting some heat locally. They're playing a lot at CBGBs.
Can we talk for just 1 second? And this was in a Corey Glover interview, found out about how he joined the band, which I thought was like really interesting, that he was at a birthday party and Vernon Reid happened to be at the birthday party, and everybody goes to sing happy birthday, and the girl whose birthday it is says, no, only Corey is going to sing to me. I just want Corey to sing happy birthday. And so he sings happy birthday, and Vernon Reid's like, oh, like, you can sing, you should come try out for my band. And he comes and tries out for the band. He's like, oh, this is great, dude. Like, I'll let you know next week. And then like 2 months goes by
Months
and he doesn't
go
hear
by,
anything
right.
from him. And then he calls him and he's like, hey, our singer dropped out. He's like, your singer dropped out? I thought I was
I thought-
auditioning to be the singer. And like, oh no, we picked this other guy. But do you want the fucking gig or not, man? Like, we got a show tonight. And he's like, oh yeah, sure. And then the other singer voluntarily chose not to come back. And that is how Corey Glover ended up being in Living Color. Like, they wanted another dude, and then he ended up being in the band.
That's
I-
funny.
I love that shit. I love that. I love those sort of fortuitous, moments. I also love, by the way, maybe it's a life goal now that, I don't want to only sing happy birthday songs, but I wouldn't mind if someone was like, no, 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 you have to sing this.
Yes.
Clearly it will never happen, but Corey Glover also, he can wail, and he looks the part too. I mean, he's a badass looking dude. He's just
Great stage presence. I watched something, one of their, I don't know, Newport Jazz Festival or something, but it was, I mean, the guy's a beast on stage.
totally. And that was a big part of their appeal. And I think a big part of what people associated them with. I still remember the Cult of Personality video from, watching that growing up. And I just remember this guy in like a neon spandex, like Dayglow sort of outfit in these huge dreads. He's just stomping around the stage. And I mean, there's definitely its presence, and you definitely remember that.
Well, he was into musical theater too. And so he was like a theater kid who was really into it. I think he said that he had a couple of like life-changing moments. And one of his life-changing moments was when because he grew up in New York, he was taken to see Jesus Christ Superstar when he was young. And Jesus Christ
One of those
Superstar,
guys.
yeah, right. But he actually said seeing Carl Anderson play Judas Iscariot, another black guy playing Judas Iscariot who could wail and it's like kind of rock. Like, it sort of opened his mind up that like, oh, there's like a place for me in this. And then he actually ended up being Judas Iscariot in Jesus Christ Superstar, like in the mid 90s or something like that, mid to late 90s. So yeah, he's an accomplished fucking dude.
Oh yeah, and in interviews I've seen with him, I mean, uh, he has like an intellect and a point of view on things that I think is really not what you would expect from the frontman of a rock band. Like normally,
Right.
and they were the anti-rock band in that sense. There's stories about them almost getting in fights with Axl Rose over like some racist shit that was in one of their songs, and you hear all the scumbag shit that they did, and Living Color was squeaky clean in that regard. They had a little bit of not infighting, but I think Muzz Skillings left the band after a few albums, was replaced by this guy Doug Wimbish, who is a phenomenal, sort of prog bass player. But other than that, and they are still playing today, I think, in that configuration.
Even when Muzz Skillings left, he left on good like on good terms. And I think it was even in the liner notes of the album that they put out that like, hey, Muzz Skillings isn't here, but we still love him, and he will come back in and like play gigs with them to this day. They're all still friends. And I do think that part of that, what you're talking about with them not being heroin addicts or trashing hotel rooms, it does go back a little bit to that, like the Obama shit, where Obama was like, I am the first black president. I can't have any scandals, because then it's going to be amplified a million times, and it's going to reflect negatively on more than just me. It's going to be used as, well, you see, this is why we never elected one of them before type of shit. And so he's like, I had to be better than fucking George W. Bush was, the guy right before me, or the guy right before him who was getting blowjobs in the Oval Office. Like, I can't do that shit. I have to be better. It's unfair, but it's certainly a reality.
Agreed. There was a different kind of sort of spotlight or different pressure on them, but it also helps when you're not a total asshole. That goes a long way. Well, maybe not in the rock business, but
yeah, if we want to compare Guns N' Roses album sales to Living Color album sales, I think being a gigantic piece of shit might have paid off for them.
Hey, they'll take their 2 million from this album.
Yeah.
but so ultimately, you know, we've sort of referenced Mick Jagger a few times, but as they're starting to come up in this scene, Mick Jagger was spending a lot of time in New York City working on one of his solo records, and he was actually, I think he was auditioning, you know, guitarists and some other musicians to actually play on his solo record, and that's when he first came across Living Color, and so he was very impressed with what they were trying to do, how different they were. And, you know, he advocated for them to be signed by Epic and was really like somebody that was in their corner, you know, pushing hard, you know, for them. So, you know, they end up getting signed. Again, they put out this album. It doesn't do a lot until, you know, ultimately MTV kind of picks up on this and just starts playing the shit out of Cult of Personality, you know, and then the story kind of is well, you know, trodden you know, at that point. And speaking of Cult of Personality, let's dive into that if y'all are ready to
Let's do
give
it.
that
Oh,
one
we're gonna talk some song specifics.
Hell yeah.
I have some specific complaints, so let's fucking get into it.